The head of NATO said that Russia is mobilizing an additional 200,000 troops, readying a massive offensive. Poland is ready to send F-16 jets to Ukraine in coordination with NATO. And Ukraine's head of intelligence says Crimea will be retaken by Ukraine. Joining us now is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Colonel, I want to get you to talk about all of this and in this breaking news in just a second. But first, you wrote a new piece called "This Time It's Different," and I want to start there. You point out how neither we nor our allies are prepared to fight an all-out war with Russia. This is what you write. And yet on Sunday, we have the NATO Admiral Robert Bauer telling us that we are ready for a, quote, direct confrontation with Russia. Listen.
We are ready to a direct confrontation with Russia.
We are. I want to put up this quote by Steve Bannon because I think it's, certainly when we talk about Crimea, right? So this is what we've been hearing from the intelligence chief in Ukraine, as I mentioned at the top, that now the Ukrainian intelligence is saying that Crimea will be retaken by Ukraine. And here's what Steve Bannon said: the globalists with the Biden regime leading have taken the war from defend Ukraine to liberate Crimea after $100 billion and losing a third of the country to the Russian army. So now this is the new message: liberate Crimea, forget defend Ukraine. Is that what we're starting to see now more? This talk is that's the new mission?
You know, I'm beginning to think that there was never much coherent strategy to begin with, other than we're here to hurt Russia. I mean, that's essentially what we were told. This whole thing has become incoherent now.
Right.
The notion of striking at and liberating, as they say, liberating Crimea is a bunch of nonsense. It's all crazy. And I'm afraid what the Russians are discovering is the only way to put an end to this nonsense is for them to commit 100% to the destruction of the Ukrainian forces and ultimately to the elimination of this regime in Kyiv. Now, they're going to do that, but instead of seeing this sort of massive blitzkrieg that we're accustomed to because of the experience with the Germans in World War II, I think you're talking about 3 or 4 axes where you have effectively meat grinders on each one. Imagine bulldozers that are just moving forward, steamrolling what they find in their path until ultimately everything is gone. This is going to take a little longer, but the Russians want to be absolutely certain that they've annihilated the enemy. That's what we're going to watch. I also think the Russians are very concerned about our impulsiveness. We're in no position to interfere with what they're doing in Ukraine. And this is the reason I wrote this. Again, people need to be warned. This regime in Washington is amateurish. They're ideological and amateurish. They don't really understand what they're up against. They never did. They miscalculated when they thought, well, the Russians are weak. See, they didn't come in there gangbusters the way we would. Well, of course they didn't, because they were dealing with brother Slavs. They didn't want to kill Orthodox Christian Slavs. They were trying to find a way around it. When it became clear there was no alternative, that's when everything changed. So you're going to see the giant meat grinders show up and crush whatever is left in that country. But the more we talk about lashing out, the more we talk about quote unquote liberation or removing Putin or these kinds of things, the worse it's going to get. We got to get out of this business and start coming to terms with reality. But reality is not very popular in Washington.
No, but it seemed like there was a moment of clarity from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in Ramstein, Germany just last week, when he said, and you pointed this out in your piece, when he said, look, there's a narrow window here for NATO. There's a very narrow window for us to, I guess what he was saying is, funnel as much weapons as we can in order to somehow help with this offensive right now.